The evening settles over the valley in a slow, muted descent, bringing with it a thin veil of rain that drifts across the temple grounds. The rooftops glisten under the dim sky, each tile holding a soft sheen of water. Air moves cool and steady between the wooden buildings, carrying the faint scent of wet earth. Nothing is hurried here. The world seems to exhale as night begins. Along the courtyard stone path, a single lantern rests near the wooden steps that lead up to the old hall. Its warm glow trembles quietly each time the wind touches it, sending a small flicker across the rain-slick stones. Water gathers at the edges of the lantern's frame, sliding down in slow, wandering lines. The light remains steady inside, a gentle ember against the deepening dusk. Rain falls in thin, silvery threads, tapping softly against bamboo leaves that sway above the outer wall. The sound is even and unbroken, like a distant memory moving through the air. Small puddles form between the stones, spreading into shallow mirrors that catch the glow of the lantern. The courtyard breathes in a rhythm shaped only by weather and time. Wooden steps darken as the rain continues, the grain of the woods swelling with moisture. The old hall behind them stands still, its paper doors pulsing faintly with the lantern's wavering light. A faint creak moves through the beams whenever the wind shifts, soft as an exhalation. Far away, a single bell hums once and then disappears into the mist. Beyond the courtyard, bamboo leans gently toward the path, their thin trunks knocking in muted tones. Drops fall from leaf to leaf, slipping downward in unrushed chains of water. Each sound blends into the next until the air feels woven from rain alone. "Let tonight be simple," the night seems to murmur in its quiet way. A faint figure appears beneath the eaves, though no footsteps are heard over the rain. Their shape is softened by the dimness, edges blurred by the drifting mist. They pause beside the wooden railing, watching the lantern's glow ripple on the wet stones. The figure does not move closer, nor farther. They simply remain with the scene as it unfolds. Wind gathers slightly, guiding a thin stream of rain across the courtyard. The lantern flickers once, but its light endures, casting a warm halo across the nearest step. The figure beneath the eaves lowers their shoulders a little, as if settling into the stillness of the moment. "Nothing is required from you," the quiet around them seems to echo. The rain deepens into a steady curtain, soft yet full, blurring the far edge of the courtyard. Mist rises from the stones, lifting in small curls as warmer air drifts from beneath the hall. The lantern glows through the veil of rain, a steady point of warmth in the cool night. Its trembling light remains untouched by any destination, waiting in the center of the quiet. The figure beneath the eaves steps back into deeper shadow, leaving the courtyard once more to the lantern and the rain. Water continues to gather along the stone path, carrying tiny ripples outward with every drop. Bamboo leans closer, brushing each other with gentle, hushed strokes. The lantern's glow softens into the mist, wavering in the breath of the evening. A thin stream of rain slides from the lantern's handle and falls into the dark puddle below, sending one faint ripple across the stone. The wooden corridor stretches along the side of the hall, dimly lit by lanterns placed far apart, their glow softened by thin paper shades. The air inside is warmer than the rain outside, holding the steady scent of cedar and old tatami. Moisture from the courtyard drifts in through the cracks, carrying the cool breath of the night. The space feels untouched by haste, shaped only by years of quiet passage. Footsteps move slowly across the floorboards, each step gentle enough to barely wake the wood beneath. The sound is soft and even, blending with the distant patter of rain beyond the walls. A trail of droplets glistens faintly on the floor where someone has walked in from outside. The old corridor accepts each sound without resistance, letting them fade into its grain. Along the wall, paper screens glow with the muted reflection of the lanterns outside. The flickering light shifts across their surfaces, creating wandering shapes that seem to drift like passing clouds. Occasionally, the wind pushes against the outer panels, sending a shiver through the wooden frame. These small movements form the quiet rhythm of the hall. A kettle somewhere deeper in the building clicks softly as it cools, its sound feather light in the surrounding stillness. Warm steam from a freshly poured cup of tea slips under a nearby doorway, carrying a faint scent of roasted leaves. The footsteps pause near this doorway, as if listening to the soft trail of warmth in the air. Nothing calls for attention. Everything simply exists as it is. Rain continues to fall beyond the corridor, tapping a steady pattern against the eaves. The sound drifts inward through thin openings, settling gently around the figure walking the hall. A sleeve brushes lightly against the wooden railing as the figure moves again. The hall absorbs each small sound as though it has been waiting for it. Far down the corridor, a lone lantern burns lower than the rest, its wick shrinking into a soft ember. The dimmer glow stretches long shadows across the floor, guiding the walker forward at an unhurried pace. Mist from the courtyard moves through a gap in the wall, catching the lantern light in small, drifting swirls. The mind may rest now, the stillness seems to whisper. The footsteps reach the end of the hall, where a sliding door stands slightly open to reveal a darkened room. A cup of tea rests on a low wooden table inside, steam rising in slow threads that twist into the shadows above. The figure lingers near the doorway, allowing the warmth to brush lightly across their face. Outside, the lanterns sway faintly in the rain. The corridor remains dim and steady as the night deepens, holding the warmth of tea, the scent of cedar, and the soft echo of footsteps. Shadows gather gently at the far end of the hall, leaving the lanterns to glow with patient stillness. The rain continues its quiet rhythm along the roof. A thin wisp of steam curls upward from the untouched cup of tea, drifting into the dark above the table. The small room holds a muted glow, shaped by the lantern resting outside the half-open door. Its light spills gently across the wooden floor, catching the grain in soft amber lines. The air is warm here, touched by the fading heat of the kettle in the kitchen. Nothing moves except the slow drift of steam rising from the cup on the table. Near the window, robes hang neatly on a wooden peg, still damp from earlier rain. A faint scent of cedar clings to the fabric, mixing with the earthy fragrance drifting in from outside. The window itself is slightly open, inviting the cool night air to settle along the edge of the room. It slips over the floor in a quiet, patient flow. Someone sits near the window, posture relaxed, hands resting lightly on their knees. Their breath moves in soft, steady waves, just enough to shape the stillness around them. Each exhale blends with the distant sound of rain, forming a rhythm that feels older than the room itself. You are safe here, the night seems to breathe back at them. The lantern's glow trembles with the shifting breeze, sending wandering lines of light across the low table. Shadows move gently with it, unfurling along the walls in slow, unhurried shapes. The figure near the window does not follow the light. They remain still, keeping company with the breath and the rain. The room accepts their presence without question. Outside, bamboo leans with each touch of the wind, brushing against one another in soft wooden murmurs. The sound drifts through the open window, filling the space with its calm, natural cadence. Occasionally, a drop of water slips from a leaf and lands on the stone path below. The figure's breath continues, steady and quiet, threading through the sounds of the evening. Inside, the warmth from the cup of tea lingers, even as the steam begins to thin. The faint trail rises beside the figure, curling toward the open window before fading into the cool air. The room feels anchored by small, gentle details: the hum of rain, the grain of the wood, the softness of damp robes drying. Nothing presses forward. Everything stays as it is. The figure leans back slightly, as though easing deeper into the surrounding calm. Their breath softens further, moving with the same rhythm as the falling rain. Lantern light flickers across their features, blurring into the dimness near the corners of the room. Night gathers without urgency, carrying its quiet into every surface. The open window holds a thin outline of moonlit mist drifting just beyond the frame. Air settles along the floor in a cool sweep, touching the warm cup before continuing on its path. The figure remains still, breathing gently as the rain persists. A pale reflection of the lantern quivers on the glass window pane, trembling with each passing breeze. A soft hum drifts through the night, carried by the cool wind moving along the temple rooftops. The air outside the small room grows lighter as the rain shifts into a gentle drizzle letting the wooden eaves drip in slow, steady intervals. Mist gathers again along the courtyard stones, lifting in faint curls whenever the breeze passes. Nothing hurries. The world rests in its own quiet weight. Beneath the far corner of the hall, a bronze bell hangs from an old timber beam. Its surface glistens with a thin layer of rain, catching the lantern light in scattered flecks of gold. When the wind moves through the eaves, it nudges the bell just enough to stir a low tone. The sound vibrates softly, spreading through the quiet spaces of the temple. The tone drifts across the courtyard and into the corridor, threading through the half-open doors. It reaches the small room gently, wrapping itself around the figure near the window like a distant echo. Lantern light softens with the sound, as if the air itself has grown warmer. The room receives the bell's voice with a calm, unbroken stillness. Outside, bamboo shifts again, meeting the breeze with a hollow, delicate sway. The rustling leaves blend with the fading ring of the bell, forming a slow-moving tapestry of sound. Drops slide from the edge of the roof, landing one by one in a shallow puddle below. "Let tonight be simple," the quiet around the hall seems to murmur. The figure rises from the window and steps softly across the wooden floor, leaving the cup of tea untouched upon the table. Their footsteps blend seamlessly with the distant rain, barely lifting beyond a whisper. The robe, hanging on the peg, sways as the door opens, releasing a brief breath of cool night air into the room. Nothing is disturbed. Everything shifts with gentle acceptance. In the corridor, the bell's lingering tone guides the figure toward the courtyard. Lanterns sway in a passing draft, scattering small patches of warm light across the floor. Mist thickens near the outer screens, swirling upward as the door slides open. The drizzle outside gathers into narrow strands of silver falling from the sky. The bell moves again beneath the eaves, its voice softer this time, more distant. The figure pauses beneath it, watching droplets slip from its rim and fall into the puddle below. Rain marks the surface with tiny ripples that fade almost as soon as they appear. The courtyard holds the moment with patient stillness. Lantern light stretches across the wet stones as the figure lingers near the bell, listening to the steady hush of drizzle, bamboo, and fading metal tone. The night drifts around them with easy, unhurried breath. A single drop gathers at the edge of the bell, trembling before it lets go and falls into the dark water beneath. The drizzle softens into a thin, drifting veil that settles gently over the courtyard. Each stone glimmers faintly beneath the lanterns still burning along the hall, their light muted by layers of mist rising from the ground. Cool air gathers under the eaves, brushing lightly against the figure standing near the bell. Nothing presses forward. The night unfolds, one quiet breath at a time. The figure reaches down and lifts the lantern left earlier beside the wooden steps. Its warm glow brightens their hands, casting small reflections on the wet ground. Rain slides down the lantern's frame in wandering paths, tracing soft lines of gold across the stone. The figure holds it steady, allowing the light to settle before taking a step forward. Mist rises higher, drifting around their ankles as they move slowly across the courtyard. The air shapes gentle swirls around the lantern's glow, as though drawing the warmth deeper into the night. Bamboo rustles beyond the wall, its sound softened into a distant, rounded whisper. The path before them glimmers in broken fragments of light. Each step sends a faint splash across shallow puddles, spreading ripples that disappear almost instantly. The lantern swings with a small, steady rhythm, its reflections stretching and shrinking across the wet stones. A cool draft brushes against the figure's sleeves, carrying the subtle scent of rain-soaked leaves. "Nothing is required from you," the quiet seems to breathe. The figure passes beneath a low archway where droplets collect at the edges of the roof. They fall in irregular intervals, tapping gently against the lantern's top. The sounds blend with the distant drizzle, creating a soft, scattered cadence that follows the figure through the courtyard. The mist curls upward, folding into their path. Ahead, the outline of the temple garden appears through the dimness, its shapes blunted by night and drifting moisture. Stone lanterns stand in silent rows, their surfaces darkened by the rain. Water pools around their bases, forming silent circles that reflect the sky. The figure lifts their lantern slightly, casting a warm halo onto the nearest stone. The wind shifts to the east, guiding the mist in long, slender streams along the garden path. Leaves shimmer under the lantern's glow, bending gently with the movement of air. A faint creak echoes from the wooden gate at the far end, touched by the same passing breeze. The figure's pace remains slow, unhurried, in harmony with the night. As they move deeper into the mist, the courtyard behind them blurs into soft shapes and distant light. The lantern's glow becomes a small, steady presence against the cool darkness, illuminating only what is immediately before them. Rain resumes in a whisper, barely touching the ground. The lantern's reflection wavers on a thin ribbon of water stretching toward the garden's edge, trembling in the shifting mist. The kitchen rests at the far side of the temple, its wooden walls holding traces of warmth from the small stove inside. Faint light drifts through the paper windows, muted by the lingering mist that clings to the exterior frames. As the figure approaches, the scent of roasted tea leaves mixes with the cool breath of the courtyard behind them. Nothing urges the steps forward. The night guides itself. Inside, the stove glows with a soft, steady ember, casting gentle shadows along the low shelves lined with clay cups. Steam rises from a recently boiled kettle, forming a pale column that curls toward the ceiling before fading into the dimness above. The warmth of the room gathers near the floor, lifting slowly with each shift of the air. The figure sets the lantern down, letting its glow join the stove's quiet light. A clay scoop rests beside a small wooden bowl filled with dark, fragrant leaves. The figure tilts the kettle slightly, letting warm water fall over the leaves in a slow, steady stream. The sound is soft, almost hidden beneath the faint patter of rain outside. Steam lifts immediately from the bowl, carrying a gentle aroma through the room. The figure steps back, allowing the tea to steep on the table. Lantern light glimmers across the rising steam, shaping it into narrow ribbons that sway and dissolve. The warmth in the air deepens, brushing against the sleeves of the figure's robe like a quiet hand. "You are safe here," the room seems to murmur with every shift of heat. Shelves along the far wall hold small jars, neatly arranged and dusted with fine grains of thyme. Wooden ladles hang from hooks, still damp from earlier washing. A pot of rice cools on the counter, covered with a folded cloth that rises gently each time warm air slips beneath it. The kitchen has settled fully into its nighttime calm. The kettle clicks again, cooling bit by bit as the tea deepens in color. The bowl releases faint ripples of warmth that drift upward, blurring the lantern's glow. The figure lifts a cup from the shelf, its surface warm from the surrounding air. They place it beside the tea, letting it gather the room's stillness. A soft draft enters through the half-open door, stirring the steam just enough to shift its shape. Shadows move lightly across the floor as the lantern flickers in the breeze. Outside, bamboo sways in slow arcs, sending faint sounds through the walls like distant murmurs. The warmth inside the kitchen remains untouched. The figure finally pours the tea, letting the liquid pool into the clay cup with a muted, steady sound. Steam rises again, soft and unhurried, drifting toward the ceiling as the lantern continues its quiet glow. Rain deepens gently outside, gathering rhythm against the roof. A thin curl of steam lifts from the surface of the tea, drifting toward the dark rafters above. The door from the kitchen opens into a narrow walkway, lined with smooth stones, their surfaces damp and reflective beneath the lingering drizzle. Cool air flows in immediately, carrying the scent of wet earth and fallen leaves. The figure steps outside, with the cup of tea in hand, the lantern's light following as a soft halo behind them. Nothing rushes. The night moves at its own quiet pace. The path curves gently toward the pond that rests at the edge of the garden. Water gathers in thin threads along the walkway, slipping between the stones and pooling at their edges. Lantern light glimmers on the ground, forming shifting shapes that stretch and fold with each movement of the figure's steps. Rain whispers against the pond beyond, steady and calm. As the figure approaches, the pond's surface reveals a faint shimmer of moonlight drifting behind a veil of mist. Ripples slide outward from where droplets fall, creating circles that glide across the dark water. Bamboo on the far side bends slightly, touching the surface with their long leaves whenever the breeze grows bold enough. The water accepts every movement without resistance. The figure pauses at the edge of the pond, lifting the lantern slightly to hold its glow above the water. Warm light spills across the ripples, catching the mist in delicate ribbons. The cup of tea warms their hands, sending faint curls of steam into the cool night air. The mind may rest now. The stillness seems to breathe around them. A wooden railing lines part of the walkway, its posts darkened by the rain. Drops slide down the wood in unhurried paths, gathering at the base before falling into the pond in quiet plinks. The figure rests one hand lightly on the railing, feeling the coolness of the damp grain. Mist drifts across their sleeves, softening the edges of their silhouette. Beyond the pond, small stone lanterns stand, half buried in the garden, their carved surfaces worn smooth by years of weather. Water gathers in their shallow indentations, reflecting the faint glow of the figure's lantern in fractured pieces. The wind passes through, brushing the tops of nearby grass and stirring faint rustles against the stones. The night folds these sounds together, gently. The drizzle begins to thin, leaving only the softest threads of rain falling onto the pond. The surface calms, holding a mixture of moonlight, mist, and lantern glow. The figure raises the cup to their lips, taking a slow sip. Warmth settles deep in their chest, drifting through them with the same ease as the mist drifting over the water. Lantern light trembles as the breeze shifts, casting narrow trails of gold across the pond's dark mirror. The figure watches the ripples spread outward, disappearing into the soft veil of mist near the far edge. Bamboo adjusts once more, brushing lightly against each other in a hollow, soothing rhythm. Nothing disturbs the night. Everything belongs to its stillness. They take another step along the pond's curve, tea in hand, lantern held low. Stones beneath their feet glisten like polished glass, shaped by the touch of countless rains over the years. The faint creak of a distant gate echoes from somewhere deeper in the temple grounds. The figure pauses, letting the sound fade into the cool air. A cluster of reeds sways near the pond's edge, their thin blades catching stray droplets that glint in the lantern's glow. The water around them moves in slow, measured pulses as the drizzle finally quiets into stillness. Mist settles closer to the ground, gathering around the figure's ankles like a soft, drifting cloth. "Let tonight be simple," the quiet atmosphere whispers. They set the cup down on a flat stone beside the path, letting the remaining steam drift upward. Their hand lingers above it for a moment, feeling the mix of warmth and cold between palm and air. The lantern sways gently at their side, casting narrow reflections that curve and bend with each faint tremor. The pond receives all of it in silence. A frog shifts somewhere beneath the reeds, sending a small ripple across the surface. The figure watches it travel outward until it touches the edge of the pond and vanishes. Moonlight slips from behind a cloud, soft and pale, brushing the water with a muted silver. The breeze grows still, leaving the bamboo to rest without motion. The figure lifts the lantern once more, letting its glow trace the faint wisps of mist drifting over the stones. Their breath moves slow and even, blending into the rhythm of the night. Far away, the bell beneath the eaves hums faintly as the wind stirs again. The sound reaches the pond as a soft vibration. Lantern light gathers in a widening patch across the path, warming the stones where the mist has thinned. The figure begins walking again, slow and unhurried, following the curve that leads around the pond's edge. Tea steam rises behind them, thinning into the air without leaving a trace. Rain returns only as a memory along the garden walls. The pond remains behind them, its surface smooth, reflecting the dim sky and drifting shapes of bamboo. Mist thickens near the far end of the garden, rolling gently into the space between the stones. A single ripple glides across the pond's dark surface, fading into the mist before reaching the far shore. The garden path narrows as it approaches the stand of bamboo rising at the edge of the temple grounds. Tall stalks cluster together, their pale green trunks darkened by the lingering rain. Mist hangs low around their bases, drifting in quiet, unhurried lines. Nothing breaks the stillness except the soft sound of leaves touching in the wind. The figure steps beneath the first arch of bamboo, lifting the lantern slightly to guide the way. Warm light spills across the narrow trunks, casting long, wavering shadows that stretch and fold across the ground. Droplets cling to the leaves overhead, trembling at their tips before falling in slow, patient drops. The air grows cooler here, touched by the breath of shaded earth. Wind moves through the bamboo in a steady, rounded hum, hollow and comforting. The stalks sway in gentle arcs, brushing one another with muted wooden murmurs. Each sound blends into the next, forming a natural rhythm that feels both distant and near. The figure pauses, letting the lantern's glow settle among the shifting shadows. Beneath the canopy, the ground is soft with fallen leaves, their surfaces slick with rain. Each step presses lightly into them, releasing a faint, earthy fragrance. The lantern illuminates a thin trail of water weaving its way between the roots and stones. Nothing is required from you, the night seems to whisper through the bamboo's breath. Further in, the bamboo grows denser, their tall shapes closing the path into a sheltered passage. The lantern's glow becomes more concentrated here, bouncing off smooth trunks in gentle arcs. The mist twists around the light, creating a soft halo that drifts with each movement of the figure's hand. Rain fades to a distant hush. Shadows ripple across the lantern's glass, cast by leaves swaying overhead. They move with a quiet grace, folding into one another like shifting pieces of dusk. A droplet falls onto the lantern's metal frame, leaving a brief echo that fades almost immediately. The air around the figure feels calm and unbroken. The bamboo continues to sway, brushing lightly against one another in slow, rhythmic patterns. When the wind grows slightly stronger, the trunks lean in unison, forming a broad arc over the path. Light filters through the gaps, scattering into thin, wandering beams. The figure watches them drift across the mist with steady breath. Deeper along the path, a fallen stalk rests against its neighbors, held in place by the surrounding growth. Water pools along its length, reflecting the lantern's glow in soft, broken fragments. The figure steps around it carefully, listening to the sound of leaves settling back into stillness. The bamboo accepts the disturbance effortlessly. The mist thickens, rising almost to the figure's knees in slow-moving folds. Lantern light turns the drifting vapor into warm gold, shaping faint patterns that scatter across the ground. The wind's hum deepens, resonating softly through the hollow trunks. "You are safe here," the atmosphere seems to say without words. A narrow clearing appears between two clusters of bamboo, opening into a small patch of open sky. Moonlight touches the clearing lightly, washing over the mist in pale silver. The figure stands at its edge, lantern held low, letting the light of night and flame mingle for a moment. The bamboo sways around them like quiet guardians of the path. A faint drip echoes from somewhere deeper within the grove, steady and unbroken. The figure inhales the cool scent of bamboo leaves and damp earth, letting breath slow with the rhythm of the wind. Lantern shadows stretch and contract, tracing gentle lines across the clearing. Nothing interrupts the soft unfolding of the moment. Mist curls upward, catching the lantern's glow in wavering ribbons. The figure observes the drifting shapes as they blend with moonlight, neither rising nor falling with clear intent. The bamboo bends slightly in a passing breeze, sending a rustling wave through the grove. The sound fades into the distance with patient ease. The figure steps toward the far side of the clearing, where the bamboo thickens again into tall, arching lines. The lantern's glow follows, brushing the edges of mist and trunk alike. Their footsteps remain soft, almost absorbed by the damp earth beneath them. Rain lingers on the leaves overhead in quiet, waiting stillness. The path continues beyond the clearing, narrowing once more beneath the towering stalks. Mist glides forward along the ground, shaping itself around the bases of the bamboo like drifting cloth. The lantern sways gently in the figure's hand, scattering warm reflections along the trunks. A single leaf detaches from overhead, falling slowly through the lantern light before settling onto the damp earth. The bamboo thins as the path nears the outer gate of the temple. The night air grows still, holding the scent of wet earth and the faint trace of smoke from a distant hearth. Lantern light drifts ahead of the figure, guiding their steps along stones polished dark by the rain. Nothing pulls them forward, The path simply unfolds beneath their feet. Beyond the last bend, a small wooden house appears, modest, resting quietly beside the gate. Its windows glow with the faintest trace of candlelight, softened by mist gathering along the frames. Rain slides down the roof in thin, steady lines, forming shallow pools around the foundation. The house looks as though it has been waiting without urgency. The figure approaches, raising the lantern so its glow meets the dim light spilling from the windows. The wooden steps leading to the entrance are damp and slightly bowed from years of weather. Drops fall from the eaves in slow intervals, tapping softly against the railing. The sound merges with the distant rustle of bamboo behind them. As the figure lifts a foot to the first step, the wood emits a quiet creak, softened by the moisture clinging to its grain. Mist curls upward along the steps, gathering around the lantern's base like a drifting veil. Warmth from the candle inside reaches the figure in faint waves, just enough to soften the cool air around them. The mind may rest now. The moment seems to breathe. They slide the door open with gentle care, allowing a narrow band of warm light to spill into the night. Inside, the room glows from a single candle, placed on a low table, its flame bending slightly with the shifting air. Shadows stretch along the walls in slow, wavering shapes. The scent of cedar and warm tatami rises to greet the entering figure. The lantern is placed beside the threshold, its glow mingling with that of the candle. Light gathers along the floor, catching the woven texture of the mats and the polished grain of the wooden beams. A folded blanket rests neatly near the far wall, untouched. The house holds the kind of warmth that comes not from fire, but from long-held quiet. Near the small window, a pot of water cools on a stand, steam no longer rising from its surface. Drops from the roof outside tap at the window frame in patient rhythm. Occasionally, the wind shifts just enough to brush the shutter, creating a soft, breath-like sound. The room receives every noise gently, asking nothing of the night. The figure steps deeper into the house, allowing the door to remain slightly open. Cool air continues to drift inside, meeting the warm candle glow and blending into a tempered calm. Bamboo rustles faintly beyond the gate, carried by the lingering breeze. Nothing interrupts the soft unfolding of the scene. The figure kneels near the candle, watching its flame move with the subtle currents of the room. Shadows sway across their sleeves, drifting like softened echoes of the flame. The lantern flickers at the threshold, holding steady against the shifting mist outside. Rain resumes beyond the gate, falling in a fine, silvery curtain. A low shelf sits against the far wall, holding a small bowl, a folded cloth, and a wooden cup. Each item seems placed with quiet intention, though none reveal their story. The air around the shelf hums with warmth from the candle, soft but steady. The figure's breath blends with the gentle stillness filling the room. Outside, the gate creaks faintly as the wind brushes past. The sound travels through the open doorway, settling into the house as though it belongs there. The figure looks toward the threshold, not with urgency, but with quiet acknowledgement. Mist gathers around the lantern's base, swirling in thin, pale ribbons. The candle flame bends again, casting a wandering shape across the far wall. The figure remains still beside it, listening to the soft interplay of rain, wind, and distant bamboo. Their hands rest loosely on their lap, warmed by the calm inside the house. Nothing stirs beyond these small, patient motions. The quiet house by the gate holds its warmth without effort, letting the lantern's glow settle into its corners. Night deepens outside, drawing the rain into steadier patterns. Mist folds around the steps leading down to the path. A thin draft moves through the open doorway, causing the candle flame to waver in a long, slow arc across the wall. The quiet house settles deeper into the night, holding its warmth in gentle layers. Rain drifts down in fine threads, whispering against the wooden roof and pooling along the narrow edge of the steps outside. Through the open doorway, a faint breath of cool air mingles with the lantern glow, shaping soft currents across the floor. Nothing changes quickly. The room unfolds with unhurried calm. Inside, robes are hung neatly beside the door, their fabric still touched by the dampness of the earlier rain. The candle's glow reaches them in slow, flickering waves, tracing the folds with pale gold. Each sway of the flame sets the shadows moving just slightly across the woven mats. The air around the robes carries a mix of cedar and cool night mist. The lantern near the threshold holds its steady flame, illuminating a small circle of the wooden floor. Its light reflects softly on the polished grain, revealing the smoothness worn by many steps over many years. When the breeze moves through the open doorway, the lantern shifts with a near imperceptible tremble. The sound of rain thickens beyond the gate. A shallow basin rests beside the far wall, filled earlier with warm water that has now cooled to match the night's breath. Small ripples linger on the surface, shaped by drafts drifting through the subtle gaps in the room. The figure kneels beside it and adjusts a folded cloth resting on the rim. The cloth absorbs a faint hint of warmth left from the candle nearby. Shadows stretch and fold as the candle leans slightly with the shifting air. The figure lifts the cloth and lays it neatly on the low table, smoothing its edges with quiet, patient movements. Lantern light brushes against their hands, giving a soft, amber glow to each deliberate gesture. Nothing in the room pushes forward. Everything slows. The figure then moves toward the robes drying by the door. They lift one sleeve lightly, ensuring it hangs straight so the remaining moisture can slip away. The fabric sways gently, brushing against the air with a soft, muted sound. "Nothing is required from you," the stillness around the doorway seems to whisper. The wind outside shifts, gathering the mist and guiding it in thin streams across the threshold. The lantern receives the mist with glowing patience, allowing it to swirl briefly around the base before drifting onward. The candle flame bends with the passing draft, casting elongated shadows across the far corner of the room. Rain deepens into a steady cadence. A wooden drawer beneath the table holds simple items: a brush, a small folded paper, a thin cord used earlier to tie the robes. The figure opens it slowly, letting the sound of wood sliding over wood blend into the ambient hush. They lift the cord, check its dry fibers between their fingers, and place it gently beside the candle. Lantern light settles over the drawer's empty space. Along the wall, the woven mats remain warm from the room's earlier heat, though the coolness of night gradually softens their surface. The figure sits near the table, hands resting lightly on their knees. Their breath moves with the rhythm of the rain outside, slow and unbroken. The candle's flame curves toward them, drawn by the faint pull of air. Occasionally, a drop of water falls from the eaves outside the open doorway, striking the stone step with a soft, hollow note. Each sound extends the quiet, rather than breaking it. The figure gazes toward the threshold, where mist floats like a thin veil over the floor. Lantern light catches the moisture, shaping it into pale, drifting threads. The scent of tea lingers faintly from the earlier walk through the garden. A small cup sits on the shelf, empty yet still warm from the kitchen's heat. Its surface glows under the candlelight, holding a reflection of the flame that wavers like a distant star. The figure glances toward it once, then returns to the stillness of the room. As the rain continues, the sound against the roof shifts from scattered taps to a more uniform hush. The house absorbs the rhythm, letting it move along the beams and floorboards without resistance. Wind brushes lightly along the outer wall, guiding faint creaks through the structure. "You are safe here," the quiet seems to murmur through the grain of the wood. The figure stands again, moving toward the doorway where cooler air pours in. They adjust the lantern's position, placing it slightly farther inside as the mist thickens. The glow widens across the mats, softening the deeper shadows that have gathered. Rain flows down the steps in gentle rivulets. The candle's flame narrows and then widens again as air slips through the opening. Its glow dances across the nearest wall, revealing subtle variations in the wood, patterns shaped by time and the hands that built this place. The figure watches the movement of light, breathing evenly as the warmth surrounds them. Nothing interrupts the moment. A folded blanket lies neatly in the corner, untouched until now. The figure walks to it and lifts it slowly, letting the fabric unfold in a quiet ripple. They lay it near the table, smoothing its edges with calm and unhurried hands. Lantern and candlelight mingle over the blanket, creating soft patterns across its surface. Shadows around the room shift once more as the wind changes direction. Mist drifts along the floor, moving smoothly under the table and gathering near the doorway. Rainlight from outside blends with the lantern glow, spreading a muted halo across the wooden threshold. The room embraces every mixture of warmth and coolness. The candle flickers higher for a moment, stretching its light toward the ceiling. The figure sits beside the blanket, resting their hands gently against the woven mat. Their breath deepens slightly, aligning with the softened rhythm of the rain on the roof. The lantern holds steady at their side, shining through the mist without effort. Beyond the doorway, the gate creaks faintly as the wind presses against it. Its sound carries across the courtyard and into the room in a single low drift. The figure turns their gaze toward the threshold, listening as the noise fades into the rain. Mist curls upward, catching the lantern light in thin, shimmering lines. Inside the quiet house, night folds around every corner. Around the robes hung to dry, around the candle's delicate flame, around the blanket waiting on the mat. The air shifts gently with each breath, each draft, each step. Rain continues its patient rhythm beyond the walls. A thin trail of mist slips across the lantern's base, spreading in a pale ribbon toward the far corner of the room. The night deepens as the rain softens into a fine, lingering drizzle that clings gently to the air. The quiet house by the gate absorbs the softened rhythm, letting the sound settle into its beams and floorboards. Cool air drifts steadily through the open doorway, brushing the woven mats with a faint, damp touch. Nothing shifts quickly. The moment opens like a slow breath. The figure rises from the blanket laid out near the table and steps toward the doorway. Lantern light follows in a warm circle, stretching across the floor until it meets the pale wash of rain-lit mist outside. The wooden threshold glows softly where the two lights mingle. The figure rests one hand lightly against the doorframe. Drops slide from the roof above, falling in quiet, even intervals. Each one strikes the stone step just beyond the threshold, sending a faint splash across the darkened surface. Mist lifts slightly with each impact, catching the lantern glow in brief, wavering glints. The scent of rain-soaked earth drifts inside, cool and grounding. The candle behind the figure flickers with the shifting draft, sending elongated shadows across the wall. Those shadows stretch and fold in gentle arcs, moving with the same rhythm as the rain outside. The robe hanging near the doorway sways once in the passing breeze, its damp fabric whispering against the air. The figure watches, breath slowing with the motion. Through the open doorway, the courtyard lies dim and blurred. Bamboo stands in softened silhouettes, their tall forms bending delicately under the continuing drizzle. Water pools along the stones, creating faint reflections that tremble each time a drop disturbs their surface. Let tonight be simple, the quiet around the courtyard seems to say. The figure leans slightly against the frame, feeling the cool grain of the wood beneath their palm. The air outside is colder than before, carrying the faint metallic scent of falling rain. Lantern light remains steady at their side, its glow brushing their sleeve with warm amber tones. Mist gathers around their feet, drifting inward in thin, curling lines. A gust of wind shifts suddenly, pressing a wave of mist into the entryway. The lantern flickers once, casting scattered patterns across the mats. The candle flame bends sharply but does not extinguish, holding its small circle of light with quiet resilience. The figure watches the interplay of flame and draft, unmoving. Outside, a drop falls from the lowest eave, sliding along a narrow channel before letting go. It drops onto a puddle below, sending a circle outward in delicate ripples. Those ripples stretch across the water until they meet the stone edge and fade. The figure's breath aligns with them, each inhale slow, each exhale soft or still. The wooden gate creaks faintly in the distance, touched by the same passing gust. Its sound rolls across the courtyard, muted by rain and mist. The figure turns their gaze gently toward the direction of the sound, though nothing more stirs. Bamboo resumes its quiet sway, accepting the return of stillness. Inside the room, the blanket lies undisturbed on the mat, warmed by lantern and candlelight. The air carries a blend of cedar, damp cloth, and the faint trace of earlier tea. Shadows shift slowly along the far wall as the candle steadies itself. The figure remains by the doorway, the cool air mingling with the warmth behind them. A thin stream of mist trails across the threshold, curling around the lantern's base before drifting deeper into the room. The lantern glows through it softly, creating a warm haze that settles around the figure's legs. The quiet holds steady, shaped only by rain, breath, and distant bamboo. Nothing presses for movement. The figure lowers their hand from the doorframe and lets it rest gently against their side. They take one slow step forward, stopping just at the edge of the doorway, where cool air meets warm light. Their sleeve brushes lightly against the lantern, sending a faint shadow across the floor. Outside, the drizzle continues its patient fall. Lantern glow spreads across the threshold, catching the edges of the mist and giving them soft amber outlines. The figure lingers in the space between inside and outside, between warmth and the cool, open air. Their breath moves in quiet harmony with the night's rhythm. A single drop of water falls from the eaves onto the lantern's handle, glinting once before sliding silently out of sight. The night folds deeper around the quiet house, wrapping the gate, the steps, and the damp stones in a soft, unbroken calm. The drizzle thins into barely audible strands of rain, drifting through the air more like mist than falling water. Cool night wind slips gently through the open doorway, brushing the edges of the woven mats. Nothing disturbs the slow settling of the world. Inside, the candle's flame narrows to a softened glow, its light swaying in small, patient arcs. The room darkens by degrees, allowing the lantern to carry more of the remaining warmth. Shadows gather along the beams overhead, growing smooth and rounded with the dimming light. The figure steps away from the doorway, letting the cool draft flow behind them. Their footsteps fall quietly across the mat, soft as fingertips passing over cloth. The blanket on the floor waits undisturbed, its folds catching the lantern glow in gentle crests. The air in the room balances between warm and cold, shaped by the faint rise of heat from the candle and the cool drift from outside. "You are safe here," the stillness seems to murmur. The figure kneels beside the blanket, smoothing its corners with a slow, unhurried touch. Their breath moves in steady waves, each exhale blending into the soft hush of rain beyond the doorway. Lantern light glimmers across their hands as they settle into a comfortable position near the low table. The candle bends slightly with the shifting air. Outside, bamboo rustles faintly, brushing against one another with hollow, rounded tones. The sound carries through the open doorway like a distant memory drifting over water. A small puddle near the steps catches the lantern glow, its surface trembling with each stray raindrop. Mist curls upward from the stones in pale, wandering shapes. The figure lowers themselves onto the blanket, letting their sleeves fall into place beside them. Their body eases into the mat beneath, supported by the warmth collected from the lantern. Breath deepens, softening into a slow, continuous rhythm that echoes the gentle pulse of rain. The cool air moving through the doorway settles lightly along their skin. The candle wick snaps once, its flame briefly stretching upward before settling again. The sound is small, barely more than a whisper, but it ripples through the quiet room like a passing breeze. Shadows shift in response, stretching across the far wall in smooth, dissolving shapes. The lantern holds steady, its glow unbroken. A faint draft glides across the floor, shaping itself around the figure's form. The air grows thicker with mist near the doorway, drifting farther into the room with each gentle gust. The figure closes their eyes, not from fatigue, but from a natural easing into the ambient calm. Nothing is required from them in this moment. Rain softens even further, becoming a sound without form, a gentle presence rather than a pattern. Bamboo settles into stillness, leaves hanging motionless as the wind calms. The courtyard beyond the doorway blurs into smooth shades of shadow and light. Lantern glow stretches just far enough to meet that blur, fading slowly into it. Inside, the warmth of the candle diminishes, leaving a dim halo that flickers unevenly along the wall. The figure remains relaxed against the blanket, breathing with the quiet. The lantern's flame wavers once, brushing the edge of the doorway with a brief glint. Mist thickens near the threshold, rising and falling like a slow tide. The room adjusts itself around these soft movements, fabric shifting, wood settling, shadows rearranging in patient arcs. The air grows denser with night, resting gently upon every object within the small house. The figure's breath continues its slow cycle, unbroken and calm. No thought presses forward. The moment simply holds. The candlelight dims further, bending into a smaller shape that barely reaches the nearest beam. The figure remains still, surrounded by warmth, mist, and the faint scent of rain. Outside, the drizzle becomes nearly silent. A thin thread of candle smoke rises as the flame falters, drifting upward into the darkened beams above. The last of the candlelight fades into a faint glow, leaving the lantern as the room's only source of warmth. Its flame moves gently within the glass, shaped by the subtle drafts drifting through the open doorway. The walls darken around it, taking on the soft, rounded contours of deep night. Nothing disturbs the slow settling of shadow across the quiet house. The figure lies relaxed upon the blanket, breath rising and falling in long, unhurried waves. Lantern light brushes their form with a muted amber tone, softening the edges of their sleeves and the folds of cloth around them. Cool air from outside glides across the floor, slipping beneath the blanket in a thin, wandering line. Mist gathers where warm and cool currents meet. Outside, the bamboo stands in dark silhouettes, no longer swaying. The drizzle has thinned to nearly nothing, leaving only the occasional drop falling from leaf to stone. These small sounds drift through the doorway like distant footfalls softened by time. The courtyard holds the quiet with patient ease. The lantern's flame trembles once as a breeze enters, bending its light across the wooden floor. Shadows stretch in elongated arcs, reaching toward the far wall before folding back into themselves. The grain of the wood glows briefly, revealing patterns shaped by years of footsteps and night air. Let tonight be simple, the silence seems to breathe. The figure's breath deepens further, becoming part of the room's rhythm. Their chest rises gently beneath the blanket, lowering again with an ease that blends into the surrounding stillness. Lantern light drifts across their face, catching faint reflections in their closed eyes. Mist edges closer, settling around the base of the blanket in thin, pale ribbons. A soft creak comes from the beams overhead as the house adjusts to the cooling air. The sound is mellow, almost melodic, fading into the dark before it can fully form. Lantern light flickers in response, scattering small reflections across the low table nearby. The warmth of the room remains steady despite the shifting draft. Beyond the threshold, a shallow puddle collects the faint moonlight that breaks through the thinning clouds. Its surface wavers with each drop falling from the eaves, forming small circles that fade into a smooth mirror again. Bamboo reflects faintly in the water, softened into blurred shapes by the mist. The world outside feels suspended in a delicate balance. Inside, the lantern's flame grows lower, its wick curling slightly as it burns. Shadows thicken in the corners of the room, drifting inward in slow, enveloping waves. The figure's breathing remains calm, creating small pockets of warmth in the air around them. The blanket's folds settle into the mat without stirring. The wind shifts once more, guiding a thin stream of mist across the threshold. It moves like a soft tide, flowing around the lantern's base and spreading along the floorboards. The flame bends again, narrowing into a long, slender shape before steadying itself. The mind may rest now, the quiet house seems to say. The blanket rises slightly with the figure's next breath, then settles again. Lantern glow traces a faint line along the edge of their hand, warm and delicate. Outside, a bird stirs once in the distant trees, then falls silent again. The night resumes its unbroken stillness. Mist thickens near the doorway, swirling in loose spirals shaped by invisible currents. The lantern's flame casts a dim, wavering glow through the shifting haze, turning it into soft gold. Shadows on the far wall tremble in slow, irregular patterns. Nothing in the room asks for attention. Everything simply drifts. The flame lowers once more, its glow tightening into a small, concentrated point. The figure remains undisturbed, resting in the warmth gathered around them. Rain has fully quieted, leaving only the faintest traces of moisture in the air. The house breathes with the night, calm and complete. Lantern light gathers itself for a final brightening, reflecting across the wooden floor in a smooth, weakened shimmer. The figure's breath syncs with the dim pulse of the flame, steady and unbroken. Mist curls upward in soft, delicate strands. A thin waver of light trembles inside the lantern, casting one lingering glow across the room before settling again. Night settles into its deepest hours, and the quiet house by the gate grows still beneath its soft veil of darkness. The lantern's dim glow rests near the doorway, its light folding gently into the mist that drifts across the floor. Outside, the courtyard lies untouched, wrapped in the lingering coolness left behind by the rain. Nothing moves except the slow shift of the valley's breath. Far beyond the temple walls, clouds stretch thin over the mountains, parting just enough for a muted silver to filter through. The moon's pale reflection catches the edges of the mist, tracing soft outlines across the stones. Air flows downward from the slopes, carrying the clean scent of passing rain. The valley feels wider, quieter, as though holding its exhale. A faint breeze enters the doorway, guiding a loose thread of mist deeper into the room. The lantern trembles once, its flame bending toward the far wall before settling again. Wood beams absorb the shifting light, darkening into smoother, deeper shadows. The figure resting beneath the blanket remains still, their breath weaving softly with the drifting air. Outside, drops remaining on bamboo leaves loosen and fall, landing in slow intervals onto the stones below. Each sound forms a delicate echo that spreads into the quiet garden. The bamboo leans in subtle arcs, responding to the breeze with gentle, creaking murmurs. These small movements trace the passing of the storm without stirring the stillness it leaves behind. Along the steps, water gathers into thin trails that slip toward the courtyard's center. Lantern light touches the flowing lines, turning them into narrow ribbons of gold before they fade into shadow. A single reed near the threshold quivers with the breeze, its tip releasing one last drop of rain. Nothing is required from you, the silence seems to say. The air inside the house cools gradually, settling into the woven mats and the folds of the blanket. The figure breathes in long, steady patterns, each exhale clouding faintly in the lantern's dim glow before thinning into the room. Mist clings close to the floor, rising only when brushed by the passing draft. The warmth within the house meets the night's cold with quiet balance. The wooden gate shifts slightly in the distance, touched by a gentle push of wind moving down from the mountains. Its creak carries into the courtyard, softened by the lingering moisture in the air. The sound blends into the overall hush, becoming part of the valley's steady transition into calm. Nothing seeks to break this rhythm. A faint beam of moonlight slips through the thinning clouds, reaching the corner of the courtyard with pale clarity. It rests lightly on a shallow puddle, creating a small reflection that shivers with every breeze. Bamboo shadows stretch across the water in long, wavering lines. The night shapes itself around these images without urgency. Inside, the lantern's flame lowers again, forming a rounded glow at the base of the glass. Shadows stretch along the floor, merging with the mist that gathers near the threshold. The figure shifts slightly beneath the blanket, not waking, but easing deeper into the surrounding warmth. Breath rises and falls in calm succession. Rain passes fully from the valley, leaving only the soft dripping of water from the roof as it dries. The garden accepts the new quiet, stones growing darker as they cool beneath the night air. Wind slows its passage through the bamboo, allowing the leaves to settle into stillness once more. The lantern continues its gentle glow. A faint hum moves across the beams overhead, the house adjusting to the change in temperature. Lantern light flickers against the wooden grain, revealing patterns shaped by years of these quiet nights. Mist sways near the doorway, drifting in and out of the room as though carried by an invisible tide. The figure remains undisturbed. The valley breathes one more sweep of cool wind through the temple grounds, carrying the last traces of cloud with it. The courtyard opens to the moonlight in softened clarity, revealing glimmers on the stones and the faint shimmer of drying leaves. Air moves through the doorway with quiet ease, touching the lantern, touching the blanket, touching the worn wooden floor. Everything pauses: mist, moonlight, bamboo, and the lingering warmth within the small house. A thin beam of moonlight slips through the doorway, settling in a pale band across the floor before slowly fading into the mist. The valley has fallen into complete stillness now, holding only the soft hush of air drifting through the temple grounds. The mist lies low, touching the stones and the base of the bamboo in pale, unmoving folds. Inside the quiet house, the lantern's glow softens into a gentle ember, casting a warm circle that barely reaches the far wall. Nothing presses forward. The night rests in its own calm weight. The figure remains beneath the blanket, their breath rising and falling with a slow, steady rhythm. The warmth gathered around them lingers in a tender balance with the cool draft flowing from the open doorway. Each exhale slips into the room like a quiet thread, mingling with the drifting mist. Lantern light brushes the edges of their form, faint and steady. Outside, the bamboo no longer sways. Its tall shadows stand in silent lines along the courtyard, softened by the moonlight filtering through thinning clouds. Water on the stones has settled, forming smooth, dark pools that hold reflections of the sky. A last drop falls from the roof, creating a small ripple that fades as soon as it forms. The lantern flame leans with the passing draft, stretching into a narrow line before rounding again. Its glow trembles, then steadies, clinging quietly to the wick. Shadows shift in response, moving across the wooden floor in slow, dissolving shapes. The mind may rest now, the stillness seems to say. The figure's breath deepens once more, chest rising beneath the blanket with gentle patience. Their hands relax along the woven mat, fingers warmed by the lantern's fading light. The air carries the faint scent of cedar and rain-soaked earth, blending into the room with soft familiarity. Mist clings close to the doorway, drifting no farther than the lantern allows. A distant sound moves through the valley, the soft rustle of leaves beyond the temple wall, stirred by a passing current of cold mountain air. The noise travels lightly, barely touching the courtyard before dissolving into the wider darkness. Bamboo stands untouched, receiving the faint breeze with silent grace. The house remains wrapped in calm. The lantern's flame lowers still, forming a small, rounded glow that hovers near the base of the glass. The mist outside thickens once again, rising in slow, curling threads that gather around the steps. Light from the lantern reaches them in thin, golden slivers, shaping soft edges along the drifting forms. Nothing interrupts their quiet movement. Inside, the warmth left by the candle has long faded, leaving the room cooled by the steady presence of night air. The figure shifts slightly beneath the blanket, settling deeper into the softness beneath them. Their breath remains even, unbroken, at ease within the unfolding quiet. Lantern glow rests along their sleeve, dim but warm. The wooden beams creak gently overhead, adjusting to the deepening cold. The sound vibrates down the walls, fading into the floor with a settled calm. Mist near the doorway swirls in faint spirals, guided by the subtle currents moving through the open space. Outside, moonlight drifts across the stones in soft silver hues. The figure relaxes further, their breathing nearly matching the rhythm of the faint wind passing through the courtyard. Nothing stirs their rest. The room accepts their stillness as naturally as the earth accepts the rain. Bamboo shadows stretch long and quiet across the threshold. The lantern holds its remaining light without struggle. A moment passes, in which even the air seems to pause, suspended between warmth and cold, shadow and glow. Mist rises just enough to catch the lantern's last shimmer, turning it into soft, rounded light. The night gathers everything into a quiet whole, asking nothing, offering nothing but presence. The figure remains undisturbed. Beyond the doorway, the valley opens under a clearer sky, moonlight brushing the peaks with pale silver. A single breeze slips through the bamboo and enters the courtyard, touching the steps, the stones, the threshold of the house. It carries the scent of wet leaves and distant pines. The lantern shifts with its passing, flame bending gently. The night settles into its final stillness, holding warmth and coolness in equal measure. A small waver of light drifts across the lantern's glass as the flame lowers, trembling once before resting into the quiet.